The Galactic Academy was buzzing with excitement. Today was the first day of a new class that nobody had ever seen before. The course was called Human Physical Culture, and it was part of the Academy's cultural exchange program. Jake Sullivan walked into the training room with a confident smile. He was the first human teacher at the Academy, and he was excited to share his knowledge. Jake was tall and muscular, with short brown hair and friendly blue eyes. He wore simple training clothes that showed his athletic build. The alien students were already waiting in the room. They came from different planets across the galaxy, and none of them had ever met a human before. They had heard stories about humans, of course. Everyone in the galaxy knew that humans came from a dangerous planet called Earth. Some called humans Deathworlders, because they survived on a planet that would kill most other species. Sixra, an insectoid student from Claxia, clicked her mandibles, nervously. Her exoskeleton was a shiny green color, and her compound eyes reflected the bright lights of the training room. She had 6 limbs, 4 for walking, and 2 for manipulation. Like most Claxians, she had never experienced violence in her entire life. Next to her stood Valora, a Shimmerin whose body was made of living crystal. She sparkled under the lights, her transparent form showing rainbow colors. Shimmerins communicated through light pulses, but they had learned to speak standard galactic for classes. Valora's people had evolved on a peaceful moon with no predators at all. Thune floated nearby, his gaseous form contained in a special suit. Nebulites like him didn't have solid bodies. They lived in the upper atmosphere of their gas giant homeworld, where physical contact was impossible. The idea of touching another being was strange and frightening to him. Jake looked at his students and smiled warmly. "Welcome to Human Physical Culture," he said in Standard Galactic. "I'm Jake Sullivan, and I'll be your instructor." The students shifted uncomfortably. They had expected the human to be more threatening, but Jake seemed friendly and calm. "Today, we're going to start with something simple," Jake continued. "We'll learn basic self-defense techniques." The room fell silent. Sixra's antennae twitched in confusion. "What is self-defense?" she asked. Jake paused, realizing that the concept might be new to them. "Self-defense means protecting yourself from harm," he explained. "On Earth, we sometimes need to defend ourselves from danger." Valora's crystalline body dimmed slightly, a sign of worry among her people. "Defend from what?" she asked, her voice tinkling like wind chimes. "Well, on Earth we have animals that might attack us," Jake said. "Or sometimes other humans might try to hurt us. So we learn how to protect ourselves." The students looked at each other in shock. They had heard that Earth was dangerous, but they didn't realize humans actually fought each other. Thune's gaseous form swirled anxiously in his containment suit. "You fight your own species?" he asked, his voice coming through the suit's speaker. Jake scratched his head trying to think of how to explain. "Not usually," he said. "Most humans are peaceful, but sometimes bad things happen and it's good to be prepared." The alien students began whispering among themselves. They had studied many species at the Academy, but none of them had classes about fighting. Most civilized species had evolved beyond physical conflict thousands of years ago. Zixra raised one of her manipulator limbs. "Teacher Jake," she said carefully, "we have heard stories about human strength. They say you can bend metal with your hands and run for days without stopping. Is this true?" Jake laughed, but not in a mocking way. "Some of those stories are exaggerated," he said. "But yes, humans are stronger than many species. Our planet's higher gravity and dangerous environment made us this way." The students looked at Jake with new interest. They had come to class expecting to meet a violent monster. Instead, they found a friendly teacher who spoke gently and smiled often. But they could see the power in his movements, the strength in his muscles. For the first time, they began to understand why humans were called Deathworlders. "Don't worry," Jake said, seeing their nervous faces. "We'll start very slowly. I promise I won't hurt anyone. Today we'll just learn some simple movements." Little did the students know that Jake's idea of simple was very different from theirs. Jake stood in the center of the training room, looking at his nervous students. He could see confusion in their alien faces, The concept of self-defense was clearly new to them. "Before we begin," Jake said, "let me explain what we'll be doing today. We'll learn how to block attacks and escape from holds. These are basic, defensive techniques that all humans learn." Valora's crystalline body flickered with uncertainty. "But Teacher Jake," she said, "who would attack us? Our worlds have no violence." Jake nodded, understanding their confusion. "On Earth, things are different. Our planet has many dangers. We have large predators like bears and tigers. Even some plants can hurt us. And in our history, humans sometimes fought each other for resources." The students gasped. Zixra's antennae stood straight up in shock. "You have plants that attack?" she clicked. "Not exactly attack," Jake explained. "But some have thorns or poison. And our animals don't just hunt for food. Sometimes they defend their territory." Thune's gaseous form swirled rapidly, showing his distress. "This is why they call you Deathworlders," he said. "Everything on your planet tries to kill you." Jake smiled gently. "It's not that bad. Humans adapted to survive. That's why we developed these skills." He walked to a storage cabinet and pulled out some soft training pads. The alien students watched with wide eyes, not knowing what these strange objects were for. "These are for practice," Jake explained. "They're soft so nobody gets hurt." Zixra tilted her head, studying the pads. "In our culture," she said, "we solve problems by talking. The Klaxian Council hasn't had a physical conflict in over 10,000 years." "That's wonderful," Jake said sincerely. "But on Earth, sometimes talking isn't enough. Sometimes you need to protect yourself first, then talk later." Valora raised a crystalline hand. "Teacher Jake, I have studied human history. Your species had many wars. Do all humans learn to fight?" Jake thought about this question. "Not everyone learns formal fighting," he said, "but most humans learn basic self-defense. Parents teach their children how to stay safe." The students began whispering among themselves again. They spoke in their native languages, but Jake could guess what they were saying. They were realizing that human children learned defense techniques that adult aliens couldn't even imagine. "May I ask something?" Thun's voice came through his suit's speaker. "If humans are so strong, why do you need to learn defense? Aren't you already the strongest species?" Jake sat down on the floor, trying to appear less intimidating. "That's a good question, Thun. Humans aren't always the strongest. On Earth, a tiger is stronger than a human. But humans are smart. We use technique, not just strength." He stood up and demonstrated a simple stance. "See how I position my feet? This gives me balance. Even a stronger opponent would have trouble pushing me over." The students watched carefully. To them, Jake's movements looked incredibly precise and controlled. They had never seen any being move with such purpose. "Now," Jake said, "let's start with something very basic. I'll show you how to block a simple push." He moved slowly, raising his arm in a blocking motion. To human eyes, it would look like slow motion. But the alien student still had trouble following the movement. Valora tried to copy the motion. Her crystalline arm moved stiffly, nothing like Jake's fluid movement. Zixra attempted it too, but her multiple limbs got confused. Thune couldn't even try since his gaseous form had no arms. "Don't worry," Jake encouraged them. "This takes practice. On Earth, children spend years learning these movements." "Years?" Zixra clicked in disbelief. "Human children train for years to fight?" Jake realized he needed to be more careful with his words. "Not to fight," he corrected. "To defend themselves. There's a big difference. Fighting means wanting to hurt someone. Defense means preventing harm." The students nodded, but Jake could see they still didn't fully understand. In their peaceful worlds, the very idea of physical conflict was foreign. They had never needed to think about defense because they had never faced attack. "Let me tell you a story," Jake said, sitting down again. "When I was a child on Earth, I met a wild dog in the forest. It was scared and angry. Because I knew basic defense, I was able to protect myself without hurting the dog. That's what this class is about. Safety without violence." The students listened intently. They were beginning to see that human self-defense wasn't about aggression. It was about survival on a dangerous world. This made them even more curious about what Jake would teach them next. Jake decided it was time to show his students what he meant by basic self-defense. He stood up and walked to the center of the training room. The alien students watched him carefully, their various sensory organs focused on his every movement. "Now, I'll demonstrate a simple blocking technique," Jake said. "Watch closely, but don't worry if you can't follow everything. We'll go through it step by step later." He took a deep breath and moved his arm in what he considered a slow, basic block. To Jake, the movement was almost painfully slow. But to the alien students, his arm seemed to blur with impossible speed. Valora's crystalline body flashed bright with alarm. Zixra's antennae vibrated so fast they hummed. Thune's gaseous form contracted into a tight ball inside his suit. That was slow. Zixra clicked, her mandibles trembling. Jake blinked in surprise. Yes, that was very slow. In real defense, it would be much faster. The students looked at each other in disbelief. If that was slow, they couldn't imagine what fast would look like. "Let me show you something else," Jake said. He picked up a training dummy from the corner of the room. The dummy was made of soft material, but designed to feel like a real person for practice. "This is called a wrist escape," Jake explained. "If someone grabs your wrist, you can get free like this." He had the dummy's hand grip his wrist, then demonstrated the escape technique. His movement was a simple twist and pull, something any human child could do. But to the alien students, it looked like magic. Jake's wrist seemed to flow like water slipping out of the grip with no effort at all. The dummy's arm moved in ways that didn't seem possible to the watching aliens. "How did you do that?" Valora asked, her voice filled with awe. "Your arm, it moved like liquid." "It's just technique," Jake said, "using the right angle and movement. Would anyone like to try?" The students backed away slightly. The idea of touching the human, even for practice, was frightening. They had seen how fast he could move. "I understand," Jake said kindly. "Let's start with something even simpler. Just practice the blocking motion without contact." He showed them again, this time breaking the movement into tiny steps. First, raise your arm, then turn your palm out. Finally, push forward slightly. Zixra tried first. Her insectoid arm moved in segments, looking nothing like Jake's smooth motion. Each joint clicked as it moved, making the block look mechanical and awkward. Valora attempted next. Her crystalline arm moved in a straight line, unable to curve like Jake's. The light refracting through her body showed her internal stress. Thunny could only watch, his gaseous form having no solid limbs to practice with. "I am learning much by observing," he said through his speaker. Jake encouraged each of them. "Good try. Remember, this takes practice. Your bodies move differently than human bodies. Find what works for you." He decided to show them one more technique. "This is called a stance," he said. "It's how we position ourselves for balance." Jake spread his feet shoulder-width apart and bent his knees slightly. To him, it was the most basic fighting stance possible. But when he shifted his weight and moved, the floor panels creaked under the pressure. The alien student stared in shock. They could see the power in his legs, the perfect balance of his body. Even standing still, Jake looked like a coiled spring ready to explode into motion. "In this stance, I'm stable," Jake explained. "It's harder to push me over or make me lose balance." Zixra carefully tried to copy the stance. With 4 legs, she had to adapt it significantly. Valora attempted it too, but her crystalline feet couldn't grip the floor the same way. "You're all doing well," Jake said. "Remember, we're not training for fighting. We're learning about human culture and physical capabilities." But the students were beginning to realize something important. What humans called basic was far beyond what most species could imagine. Jake's simple movements showed speed, strength, and control that seemed impossible to them. "Teacher Jake," Thune asked quietly, "are all humans capable of these things?" Jake thought for a moment. "Most humans can learn these basics, yes. Some are better than others, but it's part of our nature." The students fell silent, processing this information. They were starting to understand why humans were viewed with such awe and fear across the galaxy. Even their basic movements were extraordinary by alien standards. Jake felt encouraged by his students' efforts. They were trying hard, even though the movements were difficult for them. He decided it was time to show them something a little more advanced. "You're all doing great," Jake said. "Now I'll demonstrate a slightly more advanced technique. This is called a hip throw." The alien students watched nervously as Jake positioned the training dummy in front of him. The dummy was designed to weigh the same as an average human, about 170 pounds. "In this move, I use the opponent's weight against them," Jake explained. "It's not about strength. It's about leverage and technique." He gripped the dummy's arm and sleeve, then turned his hip into its body. With a smooth motion that looked effortless, Jake threw the dummy over his hip. The movement was fluid, almost beautiful in its efficiency, but when the dummy hit the floor, something unexpected happened. The reinforced training floor, designed to withstand impacts from various species, cracked loudly. Spiderweb patterns spread from the point of impact. The sound echoed through the training room like a thunderclap. All the alien students jumped back in terror. Valora's crystalline body turned completely clear, a sign of extreme fear. Zixra's exoskeleton rattled as she trembled. Thune's gaseous form spread thin inside his suit. Jake looked at the cracked floor in surprise. "Oh," he said. "I didn't mean to use that much force. Sorry about that." To Jake, it had been a gentle practice throw. He had used maybe 10% of his strength. But to the aliens, it looked like he had just casually damaged a floor built to withstand spacecraft landings. "That was gentle," Valora whispered, her voice shaking. Jake nodded, still looking at the floor. "Yes, that was very gentle. In real self-defense, the throw would be much harder." The students pressed themselves against the far wall of the training room. They were genuinely frightened now. If this was what humans called gentle, they couldn't imagine what full force would look like. Zixra's translator struggled to keep up with her rapid clicking. "Teacher Jake, that floor is made of durasteel composite. It can support a shuttle landing. How did you break it so easily?" Jake scratched his head, looking embarrassed. "Human muscles are denser than most species, and Earth's gravity is stronger than many worlds. We develop more power naturally." He picked up the training dummy to check if it was damaged. The dummy was fine, but his casual display of strength only frightened the students more. To them, the dummy looked heavy. To Jake, it might as well have been made of foam. "Maybe we should go back to simpler techniques," Jake suggested, seeing their fear. But Thone spoke up, his voice quavering through the suit's speaker. "Teacher Jake, you said these are beginner moves? What do advanced humans learn?" Jake considered the question carefully. "Advanced training includes things like joint locks, throws from different angles, and defense against weapons." "Weapons?" Valora's crystal body pulsed with alarm. "Humans train to fight against weapons?" "Only for defense," Jake assured them. "On Earth, knowing how to disarm someone can save lives." The students couldn't comprehend this. On their peaceful world's weapons were only used for hunting or ceremony. The idea of using them against other intelligent beings was unthinkable. "Let me show you something less scary," Jake said. He put down the dummy and demonstrated a simple arm lock. This technique can control someone without hurting them. But even this gentle technique looked terrifying to the aliens. Jake's movements were too fast, too precise. They could see how easily he could control another being's movements. Zixra gathered her courage to ask a question. "Teacher Jake, if all humans can do these things, why hasn't your species conquered the galaxy?" Jake smiled warmly. "Because we don't want to. Humans learned these skills for survival, not conquest. We prefer peace, just like you." The students found this hard to believe. With such physical abilities, humans could easily dominate other species. Yet here was Jake, teaching them patiently and gently. "Most humans never use these skills in real life," Jake continued. "We learn them just in case, like knowing first aid or fire safety." The aliens began to relax slightly. They were starting to understand that human strength came with human restraint. Jake wasn't a monster. He was a teacher, showing them why humans were called Deathworlders. Not because they were violent, but because they survived where others couldn't. Jake sat down on the cracked floor, trying to appear less threatening to his frightened students. He could see they needed to understand why humans had developed these abilities. "Let me tell you about Earth," Jake began. "Our planet is very different from your worlds." The alien students slowly moved away from the wall, their curiosity overcoming their fear. They formed a semicircle around Jake, though they kept a safe distance. "Earth has stronger gravity than most inhabited planets," Jake explained. "Everything there is heavier. Just walking on Earth would be hard exercise for many of you." Valora tilted her crystalline head. "How strong is Earth's gravity?" "About twice as strong as the galactic standard," Jake said. "That's why humans have denser bones and stronger muscles. We evolved to carry more weight." "But that's not all," Jake continued. "Earth has many predators. Big cats like lions and tigers, bears that weigh hundreds of pounds, wolves that hunt in packs." Zixra clicked nervously. "These animals hunt humans?" "They used to, long ago," Jake said. "Early humans had to fight or outsmart these predators to survive. We learned to make tools and weapons. We developed quick reflexes and strong bodies." Thune's gaseous form swirled with interest. "But surely you've evolved past needing these skills now." Jake shook his head. "Evolution takes millions of years. Humans have only been civilized for a few thousand years. Our bodies still react like we're in danger." He stood up slowly. "Watch this." Jake clapped his hands suddenly. All three students jumped back in surprise. "That's called a startle reflex," Jake explained. "Your bodies reacted to a sudden sound. Humans have the same reflex, but ours is much stronger. It helped our ancestors survive surprise attacks." "There's more," Jake said. "Humans have something called adrenaline. When we sense danger, our bodies release this chemical. It makes us stronger and faster for a short time." The students listened with fascination. They had studied biology, but human biology was extreme compared to their own. "In danger, a human's heart beats faster," Jake continued. "Our breathing quickens, blood flows to our muscles, pain sensitivity decreases. We can lift heavy objects we normally couldn't move." "That sounds terrifying," Valora said, her crystal body dimming. "It can be," Jake agreed. "But it saved many human lives. A mother can lift a car to save her child. A person can run faster than they ever have to escape danger." Zixra raised a manipulator limb. "Teacher Jake, you said humans also fought each other. Why?" Jake sighed. "In our history, resources were often scarce. Different tribes competed for food, water, and land. Sometimes this led to conflict. But we learned," he added quickly. "We developed ways to share resources and resolve conflicts peacefully. Modern humans prefer cooperation to fighting." "Can all humans do the things you showed us?" Thune asked. "Most humans can learn these techniques," Jake said. "But like any skill, some people are better than others. Professional fighters and soldiers train much more than regular people." "What about human children?" Valora asked. "Children start learning basic self-defense early," Jake explained. "Parents teach them how to avoid dangerous situations. Schools often have self-defense classes. It's part of our culture." The alien students were beginning to understand. Human physical abilities weren't random violence. They were evolutionary adaptations to a dangerous environment. So humans developed these skills to survive, not to conquer? Zixra asked. "Exactly," Jake smiled. "We're explorers and scientists now, not warriors. But our bodies remember the old dangers. That's why we still teach these skills." Thune floated closer to Jake than he had dared before. "I think I understand now. Your species faced challenges ours never did. You adapted to survive impossible conditions." Jake nodded. "That's right. What seems impossible to you is normal for us. But that doesn't make us better, just different." The students looked at Jake with new eyes. He wasn't a monster or a super soldier. He was a product of evolution on a harsh world. His strength and speed were natural to him as flying was to birds or swimming to fish. "Would you like to continue the lesson?" Jake asked. "I promise to be even more careful." The students looked at each other, then slowly nodded. Fear was being replaced by understanding and respect. They wanted to learn more about these remarkable beings called humans. The lesson was going better now. The alien students were less afraid and more curious about human abilities. Jake was showing them a simple defensive stance when something unexpected happened. Thun, excited by what he was learning, floated too close to the control panel on the wall. His gaseous form accidentally triggered the training room's emergency defense system. Red lights began flashing and an alarm blared through the room. "Security breach detected," announced the room's AI. "Deploying training drones." 6 combat drones dropped from the ceiling. These drones were used for advanced combat training, programmed to subdue intruders. They were equipped with stun weapons and moved with mechanical precision. The alien students froze in terror. Valora's crystalline body turned transparent with fear. Zixra curled into a defensive ball, her exoskeleton clicking rapidly. Thun contracted into the smallest space possible inside his suit. Jake's reaction was instant and automatic. His body moved before his mind fully processed the situation. This was the human adrenaline response he had just explained. The first drone fired a stun blast. Jake dodged it with impossible speed, the beam passing harmlessly by. He grabbed a training mat from the floor and threw it at the second drone, knocking it off course. 2 drones attacked simultaneously from different angles. Jake dropped low, sweeping the legs of one while catching the other mid-air. He used the captured drone as a shield against another stun blast. The students watched in shocked silence. Jake's movements were too fast to follow. He wasn't just fighting. He was dismantling the drones with surgical precision. A drone tried to flank him. Without looking, Jake kicked backward, his foot connecting perfectly with its sensor array. The drone spun out of control and crashed into the wall. The 5th drone calculated his movement pattern and fired where it predicted he would be. But Jake had already changed direction, using a move the drone's programming couldn't anticipate. He grabbed its mechanical arm and twisted, using the drone's own momentum to slam it into the floor. The last drone hesitated, its AI trying to process what had happened. In that split second of hesitation, Jake leaped impossibly high, grabbed the drone and brought it down in a controlled descent. He quickly found its emergency shutdown switch and deactivated it. The entire fight had lasted less than 30 seconds. 6 advanced combat drones lay scattered around the room, disabled, but not destroyed. Jake wasn't even breathing hard. "Is everyone okay?" Jake asked, turning to his students. The aliens couldn't speak. They had just witnessed something that defied their understanding of physical capabilities. Jake had moved faster than their eyes, could track, fought with perfect precision, and showed awareness of attacks from all directions. The door burst open. Academy security rushed in, followed by Professor Zarix, the head of the physical education department. They stopped short when they saw Jake standing calmly among the disabled drones. "What happened here?" Professor Zarix demanded. His 4 eyes blinked rapidly, a sign of confusion in his species. "Training accident," Jake explained. "The defense system activated by mistake. I had to disable the drones before they hurt the students." Professor Zarix looked at the 6 drones, then at Jake, then at the terrified students. "You defeated 6 combat drones? Alone? Without weapons?" "They're just training drones," Jake said, as if this explained everything. "They're not programmed for real combat. Their patterns are predictable." To Jake, this was true. The drones moved slower than Earth predators and followed simple attack patterns. But to everyone else in the room, what he had done was impossible. Zixra finally found her voice. "He saved us," she clicked. "The drones would have stunned us, all. Teacher Jake protected us." The security team examined the disabled drones. Each one had been neutralized with minimal damage, showing incredible control and precision. "These drones are rated to challenge military-grade combatants," one security officer said. "How did you—" Jake shrugged. "Basic combat training. Any human soldier could do the same." The room fell silent again. If this was what Jake called basic, what could trained human soldiers do? The implications were staggering. Professor Zarix turned to the students. "Are you all unharmed?" The students nodded, still in shock but physically fine. They looked at Jake with a mixture of awe and gratitude. He had protected them without hesitation, moving faster than they thought possible. "I think we should end class for today," Jake suggested. Everyone's had enough excitement. The students didn't argue. They needed time to process what they had witnessed. They had seen human capability in action, and it had exceeded their wildest imagination. News of the incident spread through the Galactic Academy like wildfire. By the next morning, every student and teacher knew about the human who had defeated 6 combat drones with his bare hands. Jake arrived at his office to find a crowd of Academy officials waiting for him. Professor Zarix was there, along with Dean Marlax, the head of the Academy, and several members of the Safety Committee. "Mr. Sullivan," Dean Marlax said, her 3 mouths speaking in harmony. "We need to discuss yesterday's incident." Jake nodded and invited them into his office. He could tell they were nervous around him now. Even Professor Zarix, who had hired him, kept a careful distance. "First, we want to thank you for protecting the students," Dean Marlax continued. "However, we have concerns about the safety of your class." Jake listened patiently as they explained their worries. Some parents had contacted the Academy, frightened by the reports. A few students had requested to transfer out of his class. "I understand your concerns," Jake said when they finished, "but I want to point out that no student was harmed. The danger came from a malfunction, not from my teaching." "That's true," Professor Zarix agreed, "but your demonstration of combat ability has unsettled many people." Jake sighed. "This is exactly why cultural exchange is important. Other species need to understand humans better." Meanwhile, in the student dining hall, Jake's students were surrounded by curious classmates. Everyone wanted to hear about the incident firsthand. "He moved like lightning," Zixra told a group of insectoid students. "The drones couldn't touch him." "I've never seen anything like it," Valora added, her crystalline body pulsing with excitement. "He protected us without hesitation." Thun floated nearby, feeling guilty. "It was my fault," he admitted. "I triggered the security system." "But Teacher Jake didn't blame you," Zixra said. "He just acted to keep us safe." Other students listened with wide eyes. Some were fascinated, others terrified. A few made plans to transfer out of the class immediately. Back in the meeting, Dean Marlax was reviewing safety protocols. "Perhaps we should limit the physical demonstrations in your class," she suggested. "With respect, Dean," Jake replied, "that would defeat the purpose. Students need to see what humans can do to understand our culture." "But the risk," one committee member began. "The only risk yesterday came from our own security system," Jake pointed out. "I've been extremely careful with the students." The discussion continued for hours. Finally, they reached a compromise. Jake's class would continue, but with additional safety measures. A security officer would monitor each session, and the more advanced demonstrations would be optional. Later that day, Jake returned to the training room to clean up. He was surprised to find 3 students waiting for him: Zixra, Valora, and Thun. "Teacher Jake," Zixra clicked nervously. "We wanted to thank you. You saved us," Valora added, her crystal form glowing warmly. Thun bobbed in his suit. "I'm sorry I caused the accident." Jake smiled at them. "You don't need to thank me or apologize. Protecting others is natural for humans, and accidents happen. We want to continue learning," Zixra said, "even though others are afraid." "Are you sure?" Jake asked, "after what you saw yesterday?" The 3 students exchanged looks, then nodded firmly. "Yesterday we saw that humans are powerful," Valora said. "But we also saw that you use that power to protect, not harm." "You could have let the drones stun us and save yourself," Thun added. "But you chose to help us instead." Jake felt touched by their words. "That's what self-defense is really about," he said, "using strength to protect those who need help." Word of the students' decision spread quickly. By the next class, several more students had decided to stay. They were still nervous around Jake, but they wanted to learn. Some students did transfer out, unable to overcome their fear. But those who stayed began to see humans differently. They understood that human strength came with human compassion. The Academy administration remained cautious but allowed the class to continue. They recognized that this was exactly why they had started the cultural exchange program, to replace fear with understanding. Jake's class became famous throughout the academy. Some came to watch in awe, others in fear, but all left with a new perspective on humans and their capabilities. 3 months had passed since the drone incident. Jake's self-defense class had become the most talked-about course at the Galactic Academy. The original fear had transformed into something else: respect and curiosity. Jake stood before his advanced class, now with 20 students from various species. Some had joined after hearing about the incident, wanting to understand humans better. Others came because they genuinely wanted to learn self-defense. Zixra stood at the front of the class, her posture confident. She had become Jake's star pupil, adapting human techniques to her insectoid body. Today was a special day for her. Zixra will demonstrate what she's learned, Jake announced. Remember, this is about technique, not strength. The class watched as Zixra faced a practice dummy. With careful precision, she performed a modified wrist escape, then a basic throw. Her movements weren't as fast as Jake's, but they were smooth and effective. The class applauded with various appendages. Zixra's mandibles clicked with pride. 3 months ago, she couldn't imagine touching the practice dummy. Now she had mastered basic defensive moves. Excellent work, Jake praised. You've adapted the techniques perfectly for your body type. Valora raised a crystalline hand. Teacher Jake, may I try the balance exercise again? Jake nodded. Valora had struggled with balance training because her crystal body didn't flex like organic tissue, but she had developed her own method, using light refraction to adjust her center of gravity. As Valora practiced, Jake noticed a group of observers at the window. This was common now. His class had become something of a spectacle, with students and teachers often stopping to watch. Among the observers was Ambassador Crean from the Galactic Council. She had come to evaluate the human cultural exchange program. Jake had been nervous about her visit, but his students were eager to show what they'd learned. Mr. Sullivan, Ambassador Crean said, entering the room. I've heard remarkable things about your class. Jake bowed respectfully. Ambassador, welcome. Would you like to observe today's lesson? The ambassador nodded, her feathered crest rippling with interest. The students continued their practice, showing how they'd adapted human techniques to their unique physiologies. Thune demonstrated awareness exercises, using his gaseous form to sense air movements. A new student, a rock-like granitoid named Boar, showed how he could use momentum despite his heavy body. Fascinating, Ambassador Crean murmured. They're not just copying human movements, they're innovating. That's exactly right, Jake said proudly. Each species brings something unique to self-defense. After class, Ambassador Crean asked to speak with Jake privately. The council was concerned about having humans teach physical skills, she admitted. We feared it might militarize other species. And now? Jake asked. Now I see we were wrong, she said. Your students haven't become violent. They've become confident. They understand humans better, and they've learned to adapt and innovate. Always. Ambassador's report to the Galactic Council changed everything. Jake's class became a model for cross-species understanding. Other human teachers were invited to share different aspects of Earth culture. The Council also updated their classification of humans. Instead of just Deathworlders, humans were now recognized as adaptive survivors with valuable skills to share. A year later, Jake watched proudly as Zixra demonstrated advanced techniques to a new group of students. She had become his teaching assistant, helping others understand both human culture and self-defense. Remember, Zixra clicked to the nervous newcomers, humans look scary, but they're just like us. They want peace and understanding. Valora had started a research project on how different species could adapt human physical techniques. Thune had written a popular blog about his experiences, helping other gaseous beings understand solid form species. Jake's simple self-defense class had grown into something much bigger. It had become a bridge between species, replacing fear with knowledge. In the Academy's Grand Hall, a new plaque was installed. in honor of the Human Cultural Exchange program, which taught us that strength and compassion can exist together. Jake smiled when he saw it. He had come to teach self-defense, but he had learned something too. The galaxy wasn't afraid of human strength anymore. They understood that humans use their abilities to protect and connect, not to conquer. As he walked to his next class, Jake saw students of all species practicing moves in the courtyard. Some were teaching others what they'd learned. The cultural exchange was working both ways. The Deathworlder had become a teacher, and the galaxy was better for it.